while Amleto is still asking to be or not to be, our speaker is asking himself, what's better, static or dynamic language? But I see that you're still working on it, so you're
I'm still working on that question, yes, definitely. Static or dynamic. Okay.
So I don't have anything more to say. I'll leave you the stage.
I hope I have something. Okay.
Make an applause or make some noise for Gil Tayar.
People here work with Node.js. Oh, good. I thought this was a front-end only conference. Okay, so people, wake up. Please wake up. The time to migrate to ESM modules in Node.js is now. And I will talk about that. That is what I'm going to talk about. First of all, I know front-end people know exactly what ES modules are, but sometimes some Node.js people don't. So a very, very quick thing about what is ESM. So since time immemorial, we've been using CommonJS in Node.js. So if we have a module, it exports, in this example, add and subtract, and another module imports it using require. That module system is not called require.js, it's called CommonJS, CJS for short. But since Node version 12, we have ESM alongside CommonJS. Very, very similar. Instead of exports.add, we have export function or export const or export whatever. And instead of requiring something, we import it. And a lot of people in the community are saying, well, if CommonJS is good enough for my parents, it's good enough for me. Okay? Well, it's true. First of all, CommonJS is a great module system, but I want to convince you that the time to migrate to ESM from CommonJS is now. And this talk is about why we need to start migrating to ESM now and how to do it. And very, very sneakily, I will explain the intricacies and the details of what ESM in Node.js is in general, and you won't even notice it. Okay. Hi. I'm probably the oldest person in the room. I have more experience than a lot of people here are have lives, like birthdays. I'm a developer at heart. Most of my talks are like detailed text talk. Tried the whole management thing, didn't really like it. I'm a huge fan of testing and a huge fan of modularity, which is why NPM, ESM, and all that is like part of a passion of mine. I'm currently an architect at Round Forest, but I'm also, was a member of the modules working group in Node.js. I had the good fortune to be part of that group that defined how ES modules work in Node.js. Okay. First part, why do we want to migrate to ESM? First of all, and most importantly, we want to be cool. Okay, never mind the pragmatics, and ESM is cool for two reasons. One, it's part of JavaScript. CommonJS is not part of JavaScript. It's a userland library which does module systems because JavaScript is dynamic, so it can do that. And ESM is part of the syntax, and obviously what all the cool kids use. Second thing, it's portable. It's portable as in other parts of JavaScript ecosystem use ESM. All front-end people almost use ESM today, import, export. And so it's compatible with front-end code. It's also compatible with browsers. Browsers today know how to use ESM natively. You can use import, like from a file or from HTTP or whatever, in browsers today. And we'll see that ESM in Node.js is trying to be as compatible as possible to that. So, an example. We have a small module, a Node.js ESM module. You can see it's importing from some other file, and I run it in Node, and it works. It'll write hello world. Yeah, well, obviously. Writes hello world. The same file, the same two files, if you put them on a web server and do script src ESM module.js with type equals module to say that it's ESM, okay, will work. So if the code is browser compatible, ESM in Node.js and ESM in the browser are compatible. Any chance I could get a small bottle of water? Thank you, somebody. Like in 5 minutes, I will not be able to speak. Sorry. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Debbie. And this is why one of the most important things, well, not most important thing, ESM forces us to use an extension. Look at that, amodule.js. In CJS, in CommonJS, we just write require a module. You don't need to write the extension. In ESM, we are forced to write the extension. Why? Because the modules working group wanted to be compatible with browsers. And in browsers, you have to write the extension. Third thing, we had cool, portable. Third thing is the developer experience is much better. First of all, tooling understands imports and exports, ESM, much better than it understands require and module.exports because it's part of the syntax. VS Code understands it's much better. WebStorm understands it's much better. There's something called top-level await, which we'll talk about in a second. And the fourth thing is really complicated, but it discusses the intricate, we'll talk about that. First of all, top-level await. What is top-level await? Top-level await, everybody knows async await, right? What if we want at the top level to use await? We can't. We all know we can't, right? We have to write an async function main and then like call the main and catch whatever error is needed. Not anymore. If you're using ESM, you can just await at the top level. It just works. And we'll explain why later, but it's interesting. So yeah, I'm using it a lot in scripts. It's wonderful. It does not work in CommonJS. Top-level await does not work in CommonJS files. Why? Because require is synchronous. Look at that require. That require is an actual function call. It's not await require, it's require. So require is synchronously getting that module and executing that module and returning. If that module had a top-level await, that module's loading would be asynchronous, not allowed. So we can't have a good stuff like top-level await in our CommonJS. But ESM is asynchronous, and we'll see that later. When I do an import, you don't see it. You don't need to do an await because it's part of the language. But when I do an import, that module is loaded asynchronously, and we'll see that. Oh, we'll see that now. Let's give an example. We have the top-level module loading another module, and that's loading two other modules. Okay, importing. Let's see. So the first thing, and this is an explanation of how ESM loads modules. And notice, this is not how Node.js loads modules. This is how the spec of ESM, okay, the spec that TC39 defined, loads modules. This is part of the standard of JavaScript. It's not something that was defined by Node.js. So the first step is load parse bind. Load parse bind loads all the modules in the tree, in the dependency graph, loads all the modules, parses them and binds them, and we'll see what that means. First of all, it goes to the top level, loads it, obviously, sees that there's an import. It's not running the file yet. It's not executing, but since import is part of the syntax, it can parse the file and look at all those imports, find all those imports. So it sees that, loads the file, and binds the imports and the exports. So it binds the export const hello to the import hello. Notice that it's not running, it's just binding the two so that it runs, they will have the same value. Then it goes to who, and then it loads who.js, binds, loads greet.js, binds. Notice here's something interesting. There's a problem. I'm importing greet and I'm exporting greeting. What happens is we get a syntax error. There's a problem here. Before the files were even run. This is an interesting thing. We get the error of the binding error before the files are even run. We fix it, and we're done. Once it's parsed and bind, now we can start running the files, obviously bottom up. Okay, if you think about it, it makes sense. It's just like CommonJS. So we're running 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And this is why the developer experience is better. It catches the wrong binding before the running. And it's doing asynchronous loading. So remember the two files, the who and the greeting at the bottom? They can be loaded at the same time and parsed at the same time. So loading a big, like 300 file tree is faster in ESM than in CommonJS, because in ESM, a lot of that is happening asynchronously, and in CommonJS, it's all synchronous. Yep. So it's faster, as we said. Asynchronous loading is faster, and requiring, because you have to have the extension, it's faster. It doesn't have to look at the disk and search for files. It knows exactly what file to look for. But async loading comes with a very, very, very heavy price. And that price is why all of you should start migrating to Node.js ESM tomorrow. Well, Monday. Oh, no, Tuesday you have a holiday or something. Independence Day? Yeah. Okay, async loading comes with a heavy price. And as I said, ESM can import CommonJS. So if I have a CommonJS module, ESM, I can import. But CommonJS cannot import ESM. So ESM can import a CJS file. So if I have an ESM file, CJS file, I can import, no problem. I cannot do the other way around. If I have a CommonJS file, I cannot import or require an ESM. This is an example. I have greet.js, which is a CommonJS file, as you can see. ESM is importing it, and it works. Nice. Why does that work? Because ESM is async. CommonJS is sync. Async can work with sync, no problem. Let's do the other way around. Greet.js is ESM. Main.js is CommonJS. I'm trying to require the CommonJS. Ooh, can't, because a synchronous system cannot import from an asynchronous system. You cannot require ESM. And a lot of, oh, never mind. And that is why it's time to migrate to ESM. What? Let's look at this CommonJS code. Mem is a library by Sindre Sorhus. It does memoization. It remembers the function call and doesn't call something twice. It just calls it once. So I count the number of, I create a memoized version of counter, which increments the counter. The first time I call it, the counter is 1. The second time I call it, the counter is 1 because it's not called. The important thing is mem. Mem is a module, and a CJS module. It's using the package mem. Very popular package, and 10 million weekly downloads, Sindre Sorhus. This is the guy. This guy maintains about 1K packages, 1,000 packages. Many of them, probably you're using them, whether you know it or not. Probably you know it, okay? Things like pretry, exec, hundreds, thousands. And last year, like start of last year, even a bit before, he wrote a blog post. I intend to move most of my 1K packages to pure ESM with 2021. He did that. Almost all of his packages are pure ESM, no more CommonJS. So version 8 is CJS, version 9 is ESM only. What happens when all of you will upgrade to version 9? Boom! You can't require an ESM package. You just can't. And it shows an error, which says that. Oh, well, it says, oh, you can do a dynamic import. You can do this, import. But import is dynamic. It returns a promise, not what we wanted. You'd have to do an await import, but you don't have top-level await. Okay? So you do this thing with the async function main. And in this case, it works. But in most cases, it's not a trivial problem. It's not a mechanical translation. But if the code was ESM, no problem. You start with CommonJS. You import a CommonJS file, and then when Sindre moves to ESM, boom, it works. Is this a real problem? It is a real problem. Today, I've been hearing more and more on this from colleagues from Twitter. It's not just Sindre Sorhus anymore. D3, a very popular package, going all in. And Node Fetch, that hurts. A lot of people use Node Fetch. It is now ESM only. And you know, what can you say? They're maintainers, it's their own free time. What can you tell? You tell them, don't do that? Yeah, right. Statistics, and this statistics is amazing. Another guy, Titus, he does MDX, a lot of packages also, pure ESM, but he every couple of months he checks how many pure ESM packages are there. So the percent of native ESM is now 1.85% of NPM. But it's worse than that. I love putting fear into the hearts of people. What if we exclude unmaintained packages? So let's take packages that were maintained in the last year. So like real packages that are used. Okay, 5% of maintained NPM is native ESM. My guess is that in the coming year, each and every one of you that use Node.js will encounter this problem. I've already seen heads nodding, so I know that it's there. And it is a problem. Dominic Denicula, anyone have an alternative to Node Fetch? Apparently they've gone ESM only. I'm seeing this on Twitter quite a few times. And this caught me by surprise as a member of the modules working group. I didn't think it'd go this fast. Maybe COVID, I don't know. I thought library maintainers would go dual mode. So the next version is both CJS and ESM. I'll show how to do that at the end. And they didn't. They went pure ESM. Doing dual mode is difficult. You'll see why. And they just said, okay, I'm going pure ESM. ESM is the future. If anybody wants, use older versions. NPM is going all ESM and very, very quickly. So the time to migrate to ESM is now, because it's cool. It's cool is nice, but it's standard. It's portable. So a lot of people use common code between front end and back end. It works. Has good developer experience, performant, so startup times are faster, and NPM package, and that is the most important thing, NPM packages are quickly migrating to pure ESM, and that is a problem for CommonJS code, a real problem. Ooh, that's when you work on the slides on, yeah. Okay, let's start about the how. We've seen why. Hopefully most of you are convinced. How do I migrate a CommonJS code base to ESM? Well, it depends on what that code base is. It could be an app, and it could be a library. A lot of you do both, but each has different migration strategy. We'll talk about that. We'll start with an app. I'm writing an app. By the way, all the code you're seeing here and examples of ESM, CommonJS, all that, yeah, you can find in my GitHub. At the end, you'll if you want, you can photograph the link to the GitHub. So this is the sample CommonJS app. It's basically 4 files. It's a service. It's a microservice. Dogs, something, whatever. Run server creates the Fastify. I do not use Express. I use Fastify. Creates the Fastify app and listens on the port. Server creates the controllers of the app. Dogs repository is the data access layer for the DB. And I didn't want to use Postgres because Docker. So I created like this file database called JSON-database.js. Okay, it's a DB that uses a file system. Theoretically, I could just go over all of them, move them to ESM and be done with it, but I want to show the incremental approach. How can I increment? Because I have 4 files, you have, I don't know, 300, 200, whatever many files you have. Doing it in one take is possible. Like you take like 2 developers, you let the other developers go home for a week and come back after a week and it's ESM only. That's one way. But the other way is the incremental approach, where we slowly migrate all the files from CJS to ESM. And the question is, how do I migrate them? Top down or bottom up? So migrate slowly from the bottom up or migrate slowly from the top down. Usually I'm a huge fan of bottom up. Okay, I love bottom up. So let's try it. Let's try bottom up, which is, I want to convert JSON-database.js to ESM. Very easy. So I convert it. We'll talk in a second how. Basically, it's changing the exports to export, right? Exports.add to exports. But now I have a problem because the docs repository which uses it can't require it anymore. We saw why. CJS cannot require ESM. Await import is too much of a hassle. We have a problem here. And this is why top-down is the better approach. It's weird, because usually we, as developers, we tend to think of bottom-up. But in this case, migrating top-down is the better approach. So let's migrate these two files, run server and server, to ESM. First of all, we rename all the ESM files from .js to .mjs. Huh? What's MJS? I've heard it called Michael Jackson scripts. And the answer is this. It's interesting. It was very controversial back in the days. We'll see that when we're done, we go back to JS. Okay, don't panic. Okay, because people panicked. And the first version of ESM had only MJS, and it blew up. Blew up Twitter. What do you mean we're gonna? JS is like from time immemorial. You can't change that. It's like changing a word from the Torah. But why did they choose having a different extension to ESM files? It's interesting and subtle. Okay. Notice server.mjs. It's importing docs repository, which is CJS, right? Or I'm using import to import a CJS. While run server is importing server, both are using import, but one is importing ESM, one is importing CJS. Now the big question Node.js people had is, okay, I have an import. I'm writing Node.js, the Node.js code itself, and I'm getting an import. How do I know whether the file is CommonJS? How do I treat it? As CommonJS or as ESM? And there are subtleties. For example, an ESM file is strict by definition, and CommonJS is not strict. I need to know before executing the file, I need to know whether it's CommonJS or ESM. Now, they spent a year arguing and trying out various use module, and let's do some heuristics to figure out if it's CJS or ESM. They decided they do not want magic and heuristics. They decided to go with an extension. So if it's .js, or .cjs, by the way, .js or .cjs, it's CommonJS. If it's MJS, it's ESM. So that is the reason. And it's great, by the way, because it allows IDEs and other tools to know whether to treat the file as ESM or CJS. This is very important. So how do I convert a CJS file to ESM? It's mechanical. In VS Code and probably WebStorm, you even have like the bulb thing where you can do various actions. One of them is convert. And it works like 95% of the time, and the other times it's just tweaks. So just convert it. You convert all the requiring to imports and all the module.exports or whatever to export. Very easy to do, nothing to write home about. You do have to add an extension to all the imports because ESM has to have the extension. We talked about this. Remove use strict. If you have a use strict at the top of the file, you can keep it, but modules are strict. You can't, they're not sloppy ever. They're strict by default. CommonJS, you have to say use strict, so just remove it and you're done. And there's no dir name and file name. Weird. That is only CommonJS. There are no global there are global parameters like the global variables like process and global, but dir name is special because it's not global to Node.js, it's global to the file, it's module level. And there's no way to do that in ESM, not nicely at least. So they said, okay, we don't do that. There is part of the syntax of JavaScript, you have import.meta.url. Import.meta.url is the URL of the current file. It's basically the file path, but in a URL way, file : / whatever. Why is it a URL? Because ESM does not work with file paths. It works with URLs, whether on the file system or with HTTP. Okay, so to get the dir name, you do this rigmarole thing. You get the URL of the module, you relativize it to get the URL of the dir of the module, and then you call file URL to path to translate it to a file path from a URL. Okay, so then you get the dir name. If you're using dir name in that file, you just copy these 2 lines, paste them. And optionally, use top-level await. If your top-level await has the async function main kind of a thing, just throw it away and just use top-level await. It's fun, really. It's like, ooh, nice. And woo, application is partially converted. We're good. One word on importing CJS, a little word. Let's see server.js. It's importing Fastify, and then it's importing dogs-repository.js. Dogs repository is a CGS file, okay? There's an interesting subtlety here. This is not as simple as you think. Let's remember load parse bind. Let's do the load parse bind here. I'm not executing anything. I'm binding Fastify with Fastify. That's not interesting. But I'm binding here. I'm loading the file. I'm not executing the file yet, and this is important. I'm not executing the file. Now I need to bind get dogs and get puppies. To what? That's the problem. I don't know what the variables are in the CommonJS module that I will bind to. Because to know what the exports are of a CommonJS file, I need to what? Do what with it? I need to execute it. That's the only way to know what the named exports are, because that's how CommonJS works. You need to execute the file to understand them. But I'm not allowed by the spec to execute the file. And there was a very vocal minority which said, no, just execute it, forget the spec. Okay, we're Node, we don't care about the spec. I think they did the right thing of not ignoring the spec. I think it's the right decision, but they have a problem here. They can't use named exports, and in first versions of ESM and Node.js, you could not use named exports with CJS. You had to do some stuff. But now it works. How does it do that? Interesting. It parses very, very quickly the file using WebAssembly, C++ code. Using regular expressions, it searches for common patterns, module.exports.add, exports, module.exports. Curly braces, etc., extracts the named using heuristics. This doesn't work always, and then gets it. If it works, fine. If it doesn't work, you have to resort to this kind of a thing. You default export, default import, and then you do destructuring. That always works. Okay. So once you're done converting all the modules to, okay, that's partial conversion. What about full conversion? Once you've done that partial conversion, after a time, everything will be converted. It's probably easy. So what do? There's a little stuff that you can do. Basically, you're done, right? But you can do a little stuff. One is rename all the .mjs back to JS. Finally, you can do that. Why? Because if you add to the package JSON type : module, then it tells Node.js to treat JS files as ESM. But you have to do, it's an all or nothing thing. And, well, basically, enjoy the coolness, developer experience, and speed of ESM. Not to mention, finally, you can use all the Syndress or Hus packages that you want. And how I envy you. Second, writing a library. CommonJS library if you want to see examples. Migration exactly the same for an app. Usually a library isn't that large, so we probably do it all at once and not like incrementally. So no need for the .mjs extension. But, and if you want to build a pure ESM library, you're good, you're done. Okay, it's just like an app, there's no difference. But, oh yeah, moving from CJS to ESM is semver major, obviously, it's a breaking change. So don't forget to upgrade, the major version of the package. But if you want this library to still be used by CJS, and I'm telling you, you are in a minority in the community, what if you wanted a dual mode? It works both in CJS and ESM. You can do that. We can create wrapper. Oh, one idea was creating wrapper CJS code that imports the ESM, right? Where's the problem? You can't import ESM. So you can't create wrapper CJS code that imports the ESM. It doesn't work. So what do? We transpile. This is ugly. I'm using ESBuild, wonderful tool. I take all the source files that are ESM and I put them in a directory, dist.cjs. The format is CJS, the platform is Node, and I translate all the .js to .cjs, okay, because .js has ESM in my package. Now I have a library that is source, which is ESM, and this CJS, which is CJS. Now we can require import from my package and require my package slash this CJS slash JSON database.cjs. But that's ugly, right? It works, but it's ugly. What I want to do is this. I want this to work, import or require. But I can't, because the main in the package JSON, which points to the entry point of my package, there can be only one main. You can't have two. Yes, you can. If you change the main to exports, this is a new ESM CJS feature in Node.js. First of all, you change it, nothing changes, it works. But you can, instead of just giving one, you can say, if you're using require, this is the entry point. If you're using import, that is the entry point. It's called conditional exports. And yay, dual mode library. That's not the problem, the exports. The problem is the transpilation. But I've done it in like 3 packages and it works. Not sure how difficult it is for larger packages. Caution, by the way, we created 2 versions of the package, CJS and ESM. Okay? If I import and require, I'm getting 2 copies of that package. Usually that's not a problem, but if you have state in the module, for example, a counter, okay? I have 2 versions of that counter, so it'll have 2 versions of that counter. You can't have 1 version of that counter. So if you have what is called singleton data in the package, problem. How do we solve it? I don't know. There's another let's skip that. Testing. All packages, all test runners work, except for Jest. Jest has problems. I've been hearing that it's starting to work. There are workarounds, but I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Jest. But other than the Jest, you have everything. If you want to mock modules, you have to use test double. It's the only module mocking library that supports ESM currently. And there we go. Summary. Time to migrate to ESM is now. It's cool, standard, portable, good developer experience, very performant, and the most important thing, if you don't do that, all the NPM packages that you want, you will not be able to use their new versions. And to migrate, use top-down. Any migrated module should be MJS. Change all the requires to imports, remove use strict, compute your name, use top-level await if you're done. Do the same thing for pure ESM. And if you want to do dual mode, you have to transpile and create a separate library and use conditional exports to make it work. So start migrating now before the ecosystem finishes the transition, and so you can enjoy all that ESM coolness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. I have a question, but I'm watching the people if someone raised the hand. Okay, yeah, you got the priority. It's my sous chef.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said about the testing library. If we move to ESM and we have test with Jest, are we able to keep our test with Jest and mocking and everything?
No.
Oh, that's a big problem.
But some people here say yes. But from what Jest does weird things with your files. It's weird, which is why you should stop using Jest, but that's an entirely different thing. But those weirdnesses don't work very well with ESM. I know that Nicolò Ribaudo, which did the talk, he has a Jest plugin that allows you to use ESM, but then you can't do mocking or stuff like that. I know that people here are using Jest with ESM, and there's some level. I don't know, but there are problems with that. I would.
Library do you suggest?
I use Mocha, but all the others are great. Mocha is the best.
So basically everything but Jest.
Everything but Jest. Yeah, the time to start migrating from Jest is now.
Okay.
We have a question from Hopin. Niklas Heck is asking how to use ESM in Node.js with TypeScript.
Oh, excellent, because I skipped those slides. Now I can, okay. TypeScript, you first migrate to TypeScript 4.7. TypeScript 4.7 has full support for Node.js ESM. Before that, it works. I use TypeScript, but it's hackish in some places. But basically, you do modules colon node next, and it transpiles imports to imports. That's it. And exports to export. Everything is great. It supports conditional exports, which it didn't support before. It supports MTS and CTS, like MJS and CJS, so it supports that. The whole rigmarole, they did a wonderful job. It took some time, but they did a wonderful job. And the weird thing is that when you're importing, you're not importing from .ts, you're importing from .js. I do not really understand why they did that. I think I understand that, but that's what it is. There we go.
Thank you so much, Gil, for your talk.
Thank you.